Lewis Campbell's world shattered the moment he learned his sister Emily had been deliberately assassinated by the Kazon Empire. It wasn't enough for these alien conquerors to wage war against humanity for decades. No, they had to target a young girl on a distant colony, snuffing out her life to crush human spirits. The revelation hit Louis like a graviton blast as he stood in the stark, gleaming command center of Earth's last defensive outpost. Holograms flickered around him, displaying the aftermath of the Kazon attack. Smoke rose from burning buildings, bodies littered the streets, and there, amidst the carnage, lay Emily's broken form. Louis clenched his fists, his military training barely containing the tsunami of grief and rage threatening to overwhelm him. The Kazon, with their superior technology and vast armadas, had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Now they resorted to murdering children. It was time to strike back. Time to... His mind raced, formulating a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. If the Kazon Emperor wanted to break human resolve by killing an innocent girl, humanity would respond in kind. They would kidnap Princess Ilara, the Emperor's only daughter. Louis turned to his assembled team of elite operatives. Marcus Chen, the demolitions expert, stood ready with an arsenal of cutting-edge explosives. Olivia Reeves, master hacker, her fingers twitching in anticipation of cracking Kazon security systems. Both hardened veterans, they knew the stakes of this war all too well. "We're going to infiltrate the Kazon diplomatic outpost on Nexus Prime," Louis announced, his voice steely with determination. "Our target is Princess Ilara. We grab her, we run, and we use her as leverage to force a ceasefire." Under the cover of night, their stealth shuttle slipped through Nexus Prime's atmosphere. Advanced cloaking technology, reverse-engineered from captured Kazon vessels, rendered them invisible to the planet's defense grid. They landed silently near the sprawling Kazon compound, its crystalline spires reaching towards the stars. Louis led the infiltration, his team moving like shadows through the compound's winding corridors. Olivia's hacking skills proved invaluable, disabling security systems and misdirecting patrols. Marcus planted charges at key points ready to cover their escape. They found Princess Ilara in a lavish chamber, surrounded by Kazon dignitaries. Louis hesitated for a split second as he saw her face. She wasn't the monster he'd imagined, but a young woman who looked almost conflicted. There was no time to dwell on it. They struck swiftly, stunning the princess and her guards with precision plasma blasts. Alarms blared as they ran. Princess Ilara slung over Louis's shoulder. Kazon security forces converged, forcing the team to fight their way out. Marcus's explosives cleared paths through waves of alien soldiers, their energy weapons unable to penetrate the humans' advanced armor. They reached the compound's hangar, commandeering a sleek Kazon shuttle. Olivia's fingers flew over the alien controls, coaxing the vessel to life as Louis strapped the unconscious princess into a seat. They blasted off, weaving through a hail of defensive fire. As they broke atmosphere, Louis allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They'd done it. They'd struck back at the heart of the Kazon Empire. But as he looked at Princess Ilara, now stirring from her stunned state, he realized the true challenge was just beginning. The stolen shuttle rendezvoused with the HSS Vengeance, a human warship hidden in the system's asteroid belt. Admiral Helena Frost, her face a mask of iron determination, greeted them as they docked. "You've done it, Campbell," she said, eyeing the Kazon princess. "Now we see if this gamble pays off." Louis nodded, his mind already grappling with the moral implications of their act. Use the princess as a bargaining chip, as planned, or attempt to win her over, to turn her against her father's empire. Before he could decide, the Vengeance's alarms blared. A Kazon battle fleet had arrived, no doubt in pursuit of their kidnapped royal. Admiral Frost barked orders, and the human warship jumped to hyperspace, vanishing in a burst of energy. As the stars streaked by outside, Louis knew one thing for certain. The war had just entered a new phase, and humanity's survival hung in the balance. The stars outside the Vengeance's viewport snapped back into focus as the ship dropped out of hyperspace. Louis steadied himself against a nearby console, his heart pounding. They'd escaped Nexus Prime, but for how long? Admiral Frost's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. All senior personnel to the command center, now. Minutes later, Lewis found himself standing before a holographic display of their current position. Frost's weathered face was grim as she addressed the assembled team. "We've got multiple Kazon pursuit vessels on our tail," she said, gesturing to angry red blips closing in on their position. "We need options, people." Louis studied the star chart, his mind racing. "There," he said, pointing to a nondescript planet. "It's uninhabited. Atmosphere looks harsh. We could use it as cover while we regroup." Frost nodded. "Make it happen, Campbell." The Vengeance plunged into the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Violent winds buffeted the ship, alarms blaring as they fought for control. Louis gripped his seat, squeezing hard, as the vessel shuddered around him. With a bone-jarring impact, they touched down on a desolate plain of jagged rock. Acrid smoke filled the air as damage reports flooded in. "Port thrusters are shot," Olivia reported, her fingers dancing over her console. "We're not going anywhere until we patch her up." As the crew scrambled to assess the damage, Louis made his way to the makeshift brig where they held Princess Ilara. She sat on a narrow cot, her regal bearing at odds with their stark surroundings. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice cold. Louis leaned against the cell's force field. "I came for information. Your father's military capabilities, weaknesses, anything you can give us." Ilara's eyes flashed. "You expect me to betray my people?" "I expect you to help us end this war before more innocents die, like my sister." Something in Ilara's expression softened. She was silent for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "My father, he's changed. This war has consumed him. The things he's done, the weapons he's building." She trailed off, shaking her head. Louis leaned closer. "What weapons?" In the command center, Olivia played back an intercepted Kazon transmission. The message was garbled, but its meaning was clear. The Emperor had mobilized the entire Imperial fleet to hunt them down. Louis shook his head. "We stick to the plan, use the princess as leverage for a ceasefire." Their argument was cut short by Marcus bursting into the room. "You're gonna want to see this," he said, breathless. They followed him outside, where howling winds whipped dust into their eyes. Marcus pointed to a series of strange markings on a nearby rock face. Louis's mind raced with possibilities. If there's weapons down there, anything we could use against the Kazon. As Louis assembled his group, a voice called out behind him. "I'm coming with you." He turned to see Princess Ilara flanked by guards. "Absolutely not," he said. Louis weighed his options. Having her along was a risk, but her knowledge could prove invaluable, and maybe, just maybe, he could continue to chip away at her loyalty to the Empire. The team descended into the alien structure, their flashlights illuminating twisting corridors covered in indecipherable symbols. Olivia ran her hand along the wall, her eyes wide with wonder. "I've never seen anything like this," she murmured. "The language, the architecture, it's beyond anything human or Kazon." They pushed deeper into the complex, tension mounting with each step. Suddenly, a metallic screech echoed through the corridor. Robotic guardians, their ancient frames crackling with energy, emerged from hidden alcoves. The team scrambled for cover, returning fire with their plasma rifles. Marcus lobbed a grenade, the explosion temporarily disorienting the guardians. They fought their way forward, Ilara proving surprisingly adept in combat. In the chaos, Louis found himself pinned down by a particularly tenacious guardian, its weapon charged, preparing for a killing blow. Suddenly, a blur of motion knocked him aside. Princess Ilara crashed into him, the energy blast scorching the ground where he'd stood moments before. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. Louis nodded his thanks, then turned to fire on the remaining guardians. With the immediate threat neutralized, they pressed on. The narrow corridors opened into a vast chamber, dominated by a pulsating energy core. Olivia's eyes lit up as she scanned the surrounding consoles. It's a communications array," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But like nothing we've ever seen. This thing could broadcast a message across the entire galaxy in an instant." Lewis's mind raced with the implications. We could coordinate all the human colonies, present a united front against the Kazon. As they worked to understand the alien technology, alarms blared throughout the facility. Lewis's comms crackled to life, Admiral Frost's voice urgent. "Campbell, we've got incoming. Kazon battle fleet just entered the system." Louis looked at his team, then at the alien tech surrounding them. They had a chance to turn the tide of the war, but only if they could get this technology operational and escape the planet. As they raced back through the alien structure, Louis caught Princess Ilara's eye. She nodded, a look of unwavering persistence on her face. Whatever came next, it was clear their fates were now intertwined. Intertwined. The distant rumble of explosions shook the alien structure, snapping Louis back to reality. "Move!" he shouted, urging his team towards the exit. They sprinted through winding corridors, the alien tech hastily packed into transport containers. As they emerged onto the planet's harsh surface, the sky above blazed with the telltale flashes of space combat. Louis and his team scrambled aboard, the ship's engines already whining as they spooled up for emergency takeoff. The deck plates vibrated beneath their feet as they raced to the command center. Admiral Frost stood before a holographic display, her face illuminated by the red glow of incoming enemy vessels. "What did you find down there?" she demanded. Louis gestured to the alien tech. "Some kind of faster-than-light communication array. If we can get it working, it could change everything." As Lewis's team rushed to integrate the alien technology, the Vengeance rocketed into the planet's upper atmosphere. The ship shuddered as energy blasts from Kazon fighters peppered its shields. The Vengeance banked hard, its point defense turrets spitting plasma at the swarming enemy craft. Louis gripped a console for support, watching as Olivia's fingers flew over her terminal. "Let me," Princess Ilara interrupted, stepping forward. "I know their protocols." Louis hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Ilara bent over Olivia's station, the two women working in tandem to crack the Kazon communications. "Got it," Olivia exclaimed. "We're in their network. We can anticipate their attack patterns." Admiral Frost wasted no time. "Feed that data to Tactical. I want our gunners one step ahead of every Kazon move." The tide of battle began to shift. The Vengeance danced through space, its weapons finding their marks with uncanny precision. Kazon fighters exploded in silent blooms of fire and debris. But their reprieve was short-lived. Marcus burst onto the bridge, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "We've got a problem," he announced. "The alien tech isn't compatible with our power systems. We can't get it online." Marcus took a deep breath. "We could cannibalize the main reactor, use it to fuel the alien device, but it's risky as hell. If it goes wrong, we're dead anyway if we can't turn this fight around," Louis finished. He turned to Admiral Frost, who gave a curt nod of approval. As Marcus and his engineering team set to work, Louis suited up for battle. "I'm leading a fighter squad," he told Frost. "We'll run interference, buy you some time." Minutes later, Louis found himself in the cockpit of a sleek human interceptor, launching into the chaotic space battle. A dozen fighters fell into formation behind him. "All right, people," he broadcast to his squad. "Hit-and-run tactics, keep them off balance. Don't let them mass for a concentrated attack on the Vengeance." They dove into the fray, plasma cannons blazing. Lewis's fighter corkscrewed through a field of debris, locking onto a Kazon cruiser. He loosed a salvo of missiles, watching with grim satisfaction as they found their mark. The enemy ship's hull cracked open, atmosphere venting in a rapidly freezing plume. But for every Kazon ship they destroyed, it seemed two more took its place. Lewis's squad dwindled as the relentless assault continued. Sweat stung his eyes as he juked and weaved, staying one step ahead of enemy fire. "Campbell," Frost's voice cut through the battle chatter. "Get back to the ship. Chen's ready to activate the array." Louis acknowledged, calling his remaining fighters to retreat. As they approached the Vengeance, he saw the ship's systems flickering, power fluctuating as it was redirected to the alien device. The moment he touched down in the landing bay, Louis sprinted for the bridge. He arrived to find the command center bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lighting. Olivia sat at her console, fingers poised over the alien interface. Marcus stood nearby, his hand on an improvised power coupling that pulsed with barely suppressed energy. "Ready?" Lewis asked. She activated the array. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a wave of energy erupted from the Vengeance, rippling out in all directions. Kazon ships closest to them suddenly went dark, their systems overloaded by the pulse. "It worked!" Olivia exclaimed. "The pulse is still expanding. It's reaching far beyond this system." As if to confirm her words, the ship's communication systems exploded with activity. Messages poured in from human colonies across the galaxy, all linked by the alien technology. Lewis's mind raced with the possibilities. "We can coordinate our forces," he said, a plan already forming. "Every human ship, every colony. We can finally present a united front." He turned to Admiral Frost. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to organize a counter-offensive. Hit the Kazon while they're reeling from the pulse." Frost nodded, a fierce grin on her weathered face. "Make it happen, Campbell. Let's show these bastards what humanity can do when we stand together." As Lewis began relaying orders through the new communication network, a fresh alarm blared through the ship. Olivia's eyes widened as she checked her console. "New contact," she reported, her voice tight. It's massive, unlike anything we've seen before." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a colossal vessel entering the system. It dwarfed even the largest Kazon battleships, its hull overflowing with weapon emplacements. A phalanx of elite guard ships surrounded it in tight formation. Princess Ilara gasped, her face pale. "The immortal throne," she whispered. "My father's ship, he's here." Lewis exchanged a look with Admiral Frost, both realizing the same thing. This was their chance to end the war once and for all. But the risk was enormous. If they failed now, humanity would be crushed beneath the full might of the Kazon Empire. "We need a plan," Frost said, her voice low and intense. "Something they won't see coming." Louis's gaze fell on Princess Ilara, an idea forming in his mind. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but it just might work. "I think I've got one," he said, "but you're not going to like it." "I think I've got one," Louis said, "but you're not going to like it." "It's suicide, Campbell," she growled. "Maybe," Louis admitted, "but it's our best shot at ending this war." Frost closed her eyes, weighing the options. Finally, she nodded. "Do it. But if you fail, I'm going to personally hunt you down in the afterlife and kick your ass." Louis grinned. "Wouldn't have it any other way, ma'am." Minutes later, Louis, Marcus, Olivia, and Princess Ilara were aboard a stealth shuttle, slipping through the chaos of battle towards the looming bulk of the immortal throne. The massive ship's hull filled their view screen, weapon emplacements jam-packed along its surface. "There," Ilara said, pointing to a barely visible seam in the hull. "Emergency docking port. It's meant for high-ranking officers to escape, but we can use it to get in." Marcus piloted the shuttle with surgical precision, maneuvering them into position. With a muffled thunk, they connected to the Kazon flagship. They emerged into dimly lit corridors, the ship's alarms blaring in the distance. Ilara took point, guiding them through the labyrinthine passages with unerring accuracy. "How do you know your way around so well?" Olivia asked, her voice low. Ilara's expression tightened. "I spent my childhood exploring every inch of this ship. It was my playground and my prison." They pressed on, encountering surprisingly little resistance. Louis felt unease prickling at the back of his neck. It was too easy. His suspicions were confirmed as they rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a squad of elite Kazon guards. For a heartbeat, both groups froze in surprise. Then all hell broke loose. Louis dove for cover as plasma bolts seared the air around him. He returned fire, his shots finding their mark with deadly precision. Beside him, Marcus hurled a grenade, the explosion sending Kazon soldiers flying. Ilara moved with fluid grace, her royal combat training evident in every motion. She disarmed one guard with a swift kick, then used his weapon to take down two more. Olivia, meanwhile, had found an access terminal. Her fingers flew over the alien interface. I'm in their systems, she called out, sealing off adjacent corridors. Now! Heavy blast doors slammed shut, cutting off any Kazon reinforcements. The remaining guards, realizing they were trapped, fought with renewed desperation. Louis found himself locked in hand-to-hand combat with a particularly large Kazon. The alien's strength was incredible, but Louis had learned a few tricks in his years of combat. He used the Kazon's momentum against him, sending the hulking figure crashing into a wall. As the last guard fell, Louis surveyed his team. They were battered and breathing hard, but alive. They pushed deeper into the immortal throne, Ilara's knowledge and Olivia's hacking skills proving invaluable. Through it all, Louis could hear the distant rumble of battle, knowing that Admiral Frost and the human fleet were fighting for their lives outside. Finally, they reached the outer defenses of the command center. A sleek alien console stood before the massive doors, pulsing with an eerie blue light. "Biometric security," Ilara said, her voice tight. "It requires Kazan royal DNA." "I can do it," she said. "My genetic signature should work." Louis hesitated. "Are you sure about this? Once we're in there, there's no turning back. You'll be betraying your father, your entire people." Ilara met his gaze, her eyes blazing with drive. "The Kazon I knew, the father I loved, he died long ago. This war, this senseless violence, it has to end. I choose humanity." She placed her hand on the console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the device hummed to life, scanning her palm. With a hiss of escaping air, the massive doors began to slide open. Louis readied his weapon. "This is it, people. Whatever happens in there, remember, we're fighting for the future of both our species. Let's make it count." They stepped into the command center, weapons raised. The cavernous room was a hive of activity, filled with Kazon officers frantically coordinating the battle outside. At the center of it, all stood a towering figure in ornate battle armor, the Kazon Emperor himself. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trembling Louis could see in her hands. "Father, please. This war has gone on long enough. Too many have died on both sides. It's time for peace." Marcus lobbed a series of flashbang grenades, the brilliant explosions disorienting the Kazon forces. In the confusion, Olivia sprinted to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. Louis knew what that meant. Now every Kazon in the fleet knew their emperor was under attack. It was a desperate gamble, but one that might just work. As the fight raged on, Louis found himself face to face with the emperor. The Kazon leader was a force of nature, his every movement honed by centuries of combat experience. Louis parried a vicious blow, feeling the impact reverberate through his entire body. They traded blows, neither able to gain the upper hand. Louis could feel his strength failing, knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. But he had to. Everything depended on it. Suddenly, Ilara appeared behind her father. With precision born of intimate knowledge, she struck at a point on the Emperor's neck. The massive Kazon stumbled, momentarily stunned. It was all the opening Louis needed. He tackled the Emperor, using every ounce of his strength to bring the alien to the ground. They grappled furiously, rolling across the command center floor. With a final desperate effort, Louis pinned the Emperor, his weapon pressed against the Kazon leader's head. The Emperor's eyes burned with hatred, but Louis saw something else there too, fear. For the first time in his long life, the Kazon leader faced defeat. Olivia's voice cut through the sudden silence. "Louis, I've got control of their comms. What do you want me to broadcast?" Louis looked down at the defeated Emperor, then at Ilara. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. Whatever he decided next would shape the future of two species. "We need to tell them everything," Ilara said, her voice soft but firm. "About the Nova Crusher, about the true cost of this war. Let the Kazon people decide for themselves." Louis nodded, his mind racing. It was a risk. There was no telling how the Kazon would react to the truth, but it was their best chance for lasting peace. "Do it," he told Olivia. "Broadcast everything to every Kazon world, every ship in the fleet." As Olivia worked, reports began flooding in. Some Kazon ships were standing down, while others launched desperate attacks against the human fleet. The next few minutes would decide everything. Louis tightened his grip on his weapon, eyes locked on the Emperor. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same. Louis tightened his grip on his weapon, eyes locked on the Emperor. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same. "Ilara's right," Louis said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We need to tell them everything. Olivia, prepare the alien FTL comm array for a galaxy-wide broadcast." Olivia nodded, her fingers flying over the alien console. "On it, give me 2 minutes to calibrate the system." As she worked, Louis and Marcus quickly secured the Emperor and his remaining loyal guards. The Kazon leader snarled and struggled against his restraints, but Louis ignored him, focusing instead on Princess Ilara. She stood before a holo recorder, her posture rigid with tension. I'm not sure I can do this," she whispered. Louis placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can. Your people need to hear the truth, and it has to come from you." Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself. As the recorder flickered to life, she began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word. As Ilara continued her heartfelt plea for peace, detailing her father's war crimes and the devastation wrought by the conflict, Louis kept his attention divided between her and the room's entrance. The calm wouldn't last long. He was proved right moments later when alarms blared throughout the ship. Marcus cursed, checking the security feeds. "We've got company. Looks like a group of hardliners trying to retake the command center." The next few minutes were a blur of plasma fire and explosions. Louis and Marcus fought with everything they had, using their superior training and the element of surprise to keep the Kazon attackers at bay. But they were outnumbered, and Louis could feel the tide of battle slowly turning against them. As he ducked behind a console to avoid a barrage of enemy fire, Louis caught sight of Ilara. She was nearing the end of her message, revealing the existence of the Nova Crusher superweapon. The look of shock and horror on the Emperor's face told Louis all he needed to know about the impact of her words. Suddenly, Louis saw a Kazon soldier take aim at Ilara. Without thinking, he launched himself forward, shielding her with his body. White-hot pain exploded in his shoulder as the plasma bolt struck him instead of its intended target. Louis stumbled, gritting his teeth against the agony. "Finish it," he growled to Ilara, who looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. She nodded, turning back to the recorder to deliver her final plea for de-escalation and peace. As she spoke, Olivia's voice rang out over the chaos of the battle. The effect was immediate. The Kazon attackers faltered, distracted by the sudden flood of information pouring through their comm systems. Louis and Marcus pressed their advantage, quickly subduing the remaining hostiles. As the situation in the command center stabilized, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Kazon civilians were taking to the streets in protest. Military ships were standing down, their crews refusing to continue fighting. The entire empire seemed to be unraveling in real time. "The Nova Crusher!" Ilara cried out in alarm. Despite the searing pain in his shoulder, Louis threw himself at the Emperor. They collided in a tangle of limbs, grappling furiously on the floor of the command center. The Emperor's strength was incredible, fueled by desperation and rage. But Louis had something stronger driving him, the knowledge that billions of lives hung in the balance. With a final Herculean effort, Louis pinned the Emperor to the ground. His uninjured arm snaked around the Kazon leader's throat, applying pressure until the alien's struggles weakened and then ceased altogether. Panting heavily, Louis rolled off the unconscious Emperor. "Secure him," he gasped to Marcus. "Make sure he can't try that again." As Marcus complied, Louis allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. The pain in his shoulder was excruciating, but he pushed it aside. There was still work to be done. Olivia's console lit up with an incoming transmission. "It's Admiral Frost," she reported. "She says she's in contact with a newly formed Kazon resistance. They're negotiating a formal ceasefire." Louis nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. "Tell her to proceed, and have her start securing key Kazon military installations. We can't risk any holdouts trying to reignite the conflict." As Olivia relayed his orders, Louis turned to Ilara. The Kazon princess looked shell-shocked, the enormity of what she had done finally sinking in. In the days that followed, the galaxy underwent a seismic shift. With the Emperor deposed and the truth of the war laid bare, the Kazon people clamored for change. Princess Ilara, with the full support of Louis and his team, stepped into a temporary leadership role. Her first act was to formally dismantle the Nova Crusher project, destroying the blueprints and scuttling the partially completed superweapon. Her second was to propose a new Galactic Council, one that would include representatives from both human and Kazon worlds. Louis, his shoulder properly treated but still recovering, threw himself into overseeing the integration of the alien faster-than-light communication technology. As human and Kazon scientists worked side by side, he saw the first real seeds of cooperation and understanding begin to sprout between the two species. 2 weeks after the fateful broadcast, Louis found himself standing on a stage in the heart of New Washington, on Earth. Admiral Frost, looking almost unfamiliar out of her battle armor, pinned a commendation to his chest as cheering crowds of humans and Kazon alike looked on. As the applause washed over him, Louis thought of his sister Emily. The pain of her loss would never truly fade, but for the first time since her death he felt a sense of peace. The war that had taken her life was over. Justice, in its own way, had been served. Beside him stood Princess Ilara, resplendent in a gown that blended human and Kazon designs. As a symbol of the new alliance between their peoples, she reached out and took Louis's hand. The simple gesture spoke volumes about how far they had come and the promise of what lay ahead. Admiral Frost stepped up to the podium, her voice ringing out across the assembled crowd. Today we stand at the dawn of a new era, an era of peace, of cooperation, and of shared discovery. To that end, I am proud to announce a joint human-Kazon mission to explore the origins of the alien technology that made our victory possible. A fresh wave of cheers erupted from the audience. Louis scanned the sea of faces before him, human and Kazon, former enemies now standing side by side. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Centuries of conflict and mistrust could not be erased overnight. But as he looked out at the united crowd, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. The galaxy would never be the same, but for the first time in living memory, its future looked bright. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.